Hello, everybody, and welcome to Guests and Gusto. This is SCAD's series of conversations, digital content with the creators and innovators who are remaking our culture. I'm Professor Michael James O'Brien, chair of the SCAD photography department, and we're very especially happy to have a true visionary, Nathan Myhrvold, with us today. Nathan's a photographer, chef, and a scientist, founder of the Modernist Cuisine and author of the accompanying award-winning book series. He also builds his own super high-res cameras. What we eat has never been more important to us than it is today. There are more than 2.5 million photos tagged as food on Instagram alone, as I'm sure you all know. Since the arrival of the Modernist Cuisine book series in 2011, Nathan's kind of artwork has resonated with people worldwide who, like us, are really passionate about food. Nathan holds a doctorate in theoretical and mathematical physics, along with 2 master's degrees and the culinary diploma. He's also the co-inventor of over 900 listed US patents. Following postdoctoral work with Stephen Hawking, Nathan went on to become the first chief technology officer at Microsoft, and then founded Intellectual Ventures, where he is the CEO. Today, he'll be talking with us about modernist cuisine and the cookbooks, which have been described as the cookbooks to end all cookbooks, and the innovative photography techniques and equipment that he uses to create truly magical images that I think will blow your mind. So it's something that if you haven't seen it, we'll be able to see that today. After the conversation, we will have time for some questions. So please type those into the chat. And now I'm going to turn over the screen very happily to Nathan Myhrvold. Welcome, Nathan.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's start with the slides. So I got interested in photography when I was very little. I first had plastic cameras, but then when I was about 9 years old, I found a Contax rangefinder in a Salvation Army thrift store for $2. Now, this is like the state-of-the-art camera in 1936 when it came out, and still had excellent optics and so forth. So that was my first real camera, and I still have it. Click. You know, I wound up getting distracted from photography by, I became a physicist, and I went into the tech industry. I worked for Bill Gates for many years. But then I decided I wanted to get back to doing some of the things I've loved my whole life. And so I retired in 1999. Click. And I wound up building another company. This is our machine shop. Our company invents new things. And of course, when you invent something brand new, you can't go buy it. You've got to build it. So that's why we have this machine shop, which is great fun because there's almost nothing we can't build. And then this is our research kitchen. So in the research kitchen, we develop all of the recipes for the books. We do some culinary R&D. It's sort of equipped like a state-of-the-art chemistry lab and a state-of-the-art kitchen at the same time.
Do you do your photographs here in this kitchen, Nathan?
Yep, we
Amazing.
We do them right around the corner from this, and then you'll see a picture later of my macro studio.
Okay.
Okay, next. So this has led to a whole bunch of books. Now, I loved food since the time I was 9 years old also. So between photography and food, the books wound up sort of harnessing both of my longtime loves. And I decided I would try to take pictures of food that would both help explain some of the concepts. So there was a didactic component. But I was also aware that if you write a 2,500 page cookbook, that could seem intimidating to people. So I thought, you know, if we made it visually stunning, maybe we could seduce people into the content and get them to say, wow, what's that?
Mhm.
And by the time they figured out what that was, they would have learned something that they might have turned the page on if it was a bunch of dense text. So here was one of the first examples. I wanted to explain what happens inside a pot when you steam some broccoli. And I thought about using diagrams, but I thought, boy, photography would be so much better, particularly for capturing this verisimilitude, this notion that it's real, that you're really looking inside the pot. Now, everyone assumes we make these all with Photoshop, but we don't. We actually cut things in half. So this really is what it looks like inside the pot, with a couple of little tweaks, because we have a piece of heat-resistant glass that has been attached to the thing so we can make it work. Okay, next. I also thought people would be curious to see what's inside their kitchen equipment. You know, we have all these magic machines in our kitchens, from mixers like this one, or microwaves or other things. And cutting them in half lets people see what's happening. And again, it's a tease. It's a, wow, I bet you didn't know there are all those gears and all that other stuff inside. And of course, we then annotate it so that people can understand it better. Next. So then this sort of evolved into what I call a new view of food. You know, we all see food a couple times a day, otherwise we get like really hungry. But there's a difference between seeing it on its way to our stomachs and whether we've really seen it. And I think food can be beautiful. And so a lot of the photos in our cookbooks, and then photos I've taken since then, are really about saying, look at the food in a different way than you would see it normally. You know, a tomato might only cross our cutting boards for a few minutes before it's cut up for a salad, but I think this tomato is beautiful and it's got an awful lot going on in it. Next. Now, some things, that was an example of attention. Do we pay attention to our tomato? But there's a class of things that we don't pay attention to because they're too fast. No matter how hard we look, we don't see the beauty inherent in them. So here's a spilled red wine as an example. And it looks like a glass sculpture, but of course, only for a very small fraction of a second. Mm-hmm. Next. And then, of course, to make shots like this requires a lot of technology. And part of that's photo technology, like any photograph, of course. But here, we built a robot catapult to throw the wine glasses. And that's because if we threw the wine glasses by hand, it was really hard to get them in the plane of focus. You have a very narrow plane of focus here. And so the technology of photography led us to say, well, if we throw it the same way every time, maybe we can catch it. We also have a laser that trips the camera, and ultra high speed flashes and lots of other fancy toys. Next. So another set of things are too slow for us to see. So click. So this is a vineyard in Washington State. And of course, we all know the Earth rotates. Well, the stars don't. So that means it looks to us like the stars rotate. And this goes around what's called the celestial pole. That's right in the center up there of the concentric circles. And the brightest little dot right by the center is Polaris, the North Star. This takes at least 4 hours to trace these nice patterns. You can't see it with your eyes. You can only see it if you record it photographically, either with a single long exposure, or as I did it here, the series of shorter exposures. And then I went to one of the best vineyards in Washington State, and the grapes were ripe and the wine was great. But the most important thing is this vineyard had rows that ran north-south. Otherwise, I would have been screwed.
Nathan, this looks like a Van Gogh. It's an amazingly beautiful picture. Did you preconceive this before you took it? Or did it happen when you got I mean, the whole setup with the wine glass and the grass, that was in your mind before you went there to set the camera up?
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah, no, well, you kind of had to, because there was no source of wine glasses in the vineyard.
Okay.
And I knew I wanted the circular motion of the stars, which meant I needed a north-south facing thing. And then I wanted to make sure that the grapes got a little bit of light thrown on them during the exposure, so that we could see that there were these wonderful grapes there. And it's an example of something that is completely true, yet we can't see it without help.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Too small, okay? Things that are microscopic, our eyes can't make out. So I've done a lot of exploration there. Click. So this is actually a combination of too small and the effects of strange lighting. I think we've all seen that if you have polarizing sunglasses on and you get in a car, sometimes the windshield has this mottled color. Well, that's because the windshield has some plastic in it. There's a property called birefringence. It treats polarized light differently. Well, so does vitamin C. And so this is a picture of vitamin C.
In what form, Nathan?
And you take some vitamin C, just crush up a pill, and here, click. There's a picture next. And you dissolve it in water, put it on a microscope slide, and then let it crystallize.
Wow.
And it crystallizes in a very fine layer. You can see here, besides vitamin C, we're trying all kinds of things, maple syrup and mustard and ketchup and so forth. Most of those things don't crystallize super well, but vitamin C is amazing. So then you look at it under what's called cross polars. You have polarizing filters that are set. So the only light that gets through is light that has been bent by this, the crystals, the birefringence of the crystals. Now, besides vitamin C, aspirin looks awesome. There's a whole bunch of things that just look incredible that way. And it's something that we experience absolutely every day, but we never see it like that.
Right.
Okay, next. There's things that are too big for us to comprehend. Next. So this is farmland in Eastern Washington. And this could be almost any scale, but if you look all the way up at the top, there's a giant combine up there at the top. So this is actually huge. This is a good fraction of a mile across. This area in Eastern Washington is called the Palouse. And it's the most beautiful farmland in the world because it has these incredible rolling hills. And you get this wonderful sheen from, this is wheat, and it's young wheat. And there's a natural sheen off of the leaves that does this. Next.
Nathan, is this a long exposure too?
No, it's a short exposure because here's where I was sitting.
No, I don't know where you were sitting in the grass, I assume, or on the.
No, here's this next picture. I don't know if it's.
I see. Sorry, got it. Okay.
That's an aerial shot.
Of that picture. Amazing. I was going to ask you about the light too. Now we see it. Great. Wow.
Yeah, and the key to this shot is that there's a strap that holds me in because the plane has to bank for me to get a good shot, and the door is off.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Then there's things that are hidden. Click. So this is something that often stumps people as to what sort of food this is. It's blueberries. And the first thing is people aren't used to seeing blueberries this close. But then the second thing is, who knew that blueberries had orange seeds?
Mm.
I certainly didn't until I cut one in half. So it's an interesting hidden aspect of food. Click. Then there's also things we take in homage to other deals. Click. This is my homage to Andy Warhol and the Campbell's soup can. So here we made it by dynamic by dropping fresh tomato slices into the Campbell's soup can.
Wow.
Next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Giuseppe Arcimboldo was a 16th century Italian artist, and he was known for painting portraits of people using food. Well, I was writing a book on pizza, and we decided we would make a pizza man. That is what Arcimboldo might have done. Of course, pizza didn't exist in the age of Arcimboldo. It was only invented in the very late 1700s, so he was more than 100 years too early. Next. We also sometimes will get carried away and recreate a historical event. Click. So on one side here, you see a wall mural from Pompeii. And I wrote a big book on bread. And Roman bread is something we know a lot about because of Pompeii. And Pompeii had about 30 bakeries in it. Well, this wonderful mural was in it was in the house of one of the guys that owned the bakery. And so we got a little carried away when I say one of the guys that works in the book projects is a cabinet maker. He says, well, I could make that cabinet. So by God, and then we took people in our lab and we sort of did a casting call to pick the folks for the to be the models. Now, the interesting thing about this, or an interesting thing, is it's hard to get it perfect for an amusing reason. The Romans didn't have perspective.
Yeah.
And so this isn't perfectly right perspective. I had to shoot it from quite a ways away with a telephoto lens to flatten the perspective because the Romans only do orthographic things. It wasn't until the Renaissance that people figured out perspective. Click. His photography is, of course, a very new technology compared to other means of artistic expression. And one of the things I love about photography is it was immediately seized upon by people who made great art. You know, if you look at some of the pictures, Auger's pictures of Paris, or even some of Emerson's first pictures, they're incredible. Well, there's no reason for us to stop with that. Of course, historically, better lenses in film gave us lots of new capabilities, but these days, the digital world lets you do amazing stuff. So I do a lot of pictures now that involve camera rigs that we either cobble together out of lots of parts or just build from scratch in order to do things you couldn't do otherwise. So this is a ultra high speed picture. Now we had one of those before. Here we have a video that shows how we look at it to figure out what to do. This is an ultra high speed camera, and this is what it looks like in video.
Wow.
So we had to build this is a technique that I learned in culinary school in France. It's called sabering a champagne bottle. And so the sommelier would traditionally take a sword, a saber, and whack the end of the champagne bottle off. And some places in France, and even in the US, you can get a sommelier to do that still.
I saw that in Atlanta about 2 weeks ago at a club here, and I thought they were joking, and it worked perfectly. There was no glass in the champagne, so that was an amazing thing to see that done.
The reason there's no glass in the champagne, of course, is that it's under pressure. That's what we saw. If you knock it off and then it takes off.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so to do this, we had to build a champagne sabering robot so that we could do it at will. Here, we'll watch the video one more time. There's a little robot that slams that piece of metal forward, and it just takes the whole neck of the bottle off. Okay, next. I guess let's let this finish. Here's another shot. This is we titled this "Don't Whack the Bottle," because of course we've all whacked the bottom of a ketchup bottle only to have it shoot out. And then here's a video of that. So we basically put ketchup into about an inch diameter plastic tube. Then to put the bottle around it, we cut the bottom off a ketchup bottle and inserted this through the bottom. Here's a mustard version that I'm trying to art direct and get to look right.
So Nathan, are these just a lot of trial and error to get the visual the way you want it?
Yes. Yes, I had no idea it would look as good as it did, to be honest. And we played with the air pressure. If you put the air pressure too high, the ketchup sort of atomizes and you get this red cloud.
Right.
And too low and it doesn't come out. And in the middle, it formed that disc almost, which was quite stunning. Yeah. This is dropping raspberries into a tank of water. And then we got a video on that too. There's the raspberries dropping in ultra slow motion. And this is from below the tank of water. And then here it is from the side. Now this is in dark field, whereas the picture I did before was high key in light field. It's the same idea. All those little dots look like stars. Those are bubbles that stick to the glass. So you have to actually squeegee the glass off from the inside. Wow. Whenever I have coffee, which is pretty much every morning, I marvel at how the cream looks going into it. So I thought we would try to capture that. And here's this picture. And here, the thing that's nice about the video is the video gives you a way of choosing which point in the thing you want to capture. See, there's a flash there, and that was where I actually took the picture. But by seeing the whole thing with the video, you're able to compose it and then say, oh, I wanted it right at this thing. And then you'll see the flash go off here in a moment when it gets fully developed. But I could have done it at any point. So
yeah. So there's a piece of glass attached to that vessel. Is that right, Nathan?
Yes. So what we did is we cut it in half, and then we glue a piece of glass to the front very carefully. And then we photograph the other half of the glass in the same position.
Okay.
And the photograph of the other half of the glass is what gives us a picture of the rim without the glue on it, basically. Sometimes we have to use polarizing filters to take the light off the glass, or we can light it carefully, with black velvet around so you don't see it.
Now, Nathan, do you black backgrounds and white backgrounds? The black backgrounds give a kind of Flemish feeling to the white seems much more like Irving Penn or modern sort of studio photography. Do you always do both black and white backgrounds and then decide like you did with the raspberries, or?
Not always. It depends. I mean, there are two standbys that if you just pick a random subject, you're going to get it. But other times, I like. Let's go to the next picture now. I like the verisimilitude of it being in a context, which is, of course, can be out of focus just by the nature of things. Here we built a table that's robotically controlled that goes up and down, so it shakes and it makes everything wiggle. But here, I felt it was better to put it in a context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
So this was one of our earliest shots. For the cookbook, we had a section on sandwiches. And I wanted to describe how sandwiches go together and have it in a pictorial fashion. Well, in engineering, there's something called an exploded diagram. And this is where they would draw something with all of the parts like they were flying out from it. And I first encountered that working on my mom's car as a teenager. The repair manuals would always have exploded diagrams.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my exploded diagram of how a hamburger comes together. And we've developed a couple ways to do this.
Mm-hmm.
This is the one at a time method, where I'm shooting each layer one at a time, and you just have to plan where they're going to go so you get the angle right. We also have made a rig that lets us do it all at once. And then at a certain point, you start, sliding down the rabbit hole, and you decide that you need to build your own cameras because there's things that you want to do. So this is an example of a picture that uses focus stacking. So this is many, many photos that were taken and then combined in software so that we could have as much depth of field as we have the patience to take. Click. And this is the camera that I made it from. Now, it looks like it's a view camera because parts of it were salvaged from a view camera, but it's quite different. It's got rather than a normal view camera rail, it has a computer controlled stage that can move the lens by tiny fractions. Click. Here's another example of a special camera shot. So this is out in the field. This is Second Beach in the Olympic Peninsula. And here we made a camera rig that we could take out in the field that would take these stacked pictures. And this is relatively simple for us. Here we just have a focus motor, sort of like people use in cinema for doing follow focus, but it's controlled by a computer program, and we'll take several hundred shots for something with that wide a depth of field and put them together. Next.
Blueberries.
Here I wanted to make a macro panorama shot. Normally panorama you think of as being the antithesis of macro. It's wide angle, but why couldn't you have the picture you'd get if you gave an ant a panorama camera? Well, I found a way to do this, but I had to build the camera myself.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the camera. It uses a very special lens that I bought from an industrial subsidiary of Nikon. And it's made for industrial inspection, where you will look at electronic circuits as they pass a conveyor belt and decide, hey, is that complete or is there a flaw in it? Well, it turns out it has a big image circle. In fact, the image circle at 5x is 7 inches in diameter. It's the same as a 5x7 view camera. So then I built I had to build the back, which is a sliding back that takes a phase 1 camera across, and it takes 5 shots just to make one frame.
Right.
And then the whole thing is computer controlled for focus. So it winds up taking more than 1,000 pictures to make that view of the blueberries. Here's another shot. This is the flower on a chive. Now, if you've ever seen chive flowers, you might think, no, the chive flower doesn't look like that. It's this it's this round thing that's got lots of tiny little elements. Well, this is one of the tiny elements of a chive flower. And for this, you need to use microscope objectives. So click. So this is a microscope that I built for this purpose. And it's, again, computer controlled because we need to move the camera and the whole unit by 1 micron increments in order to get at high magnification to get the right focus. Now, a human hair is usually about 100 microns. So you move it by 100th of a human hair every photo. And doing that reliably requires fancy equipment, but once you get it, it works great. Next. This is a snowflake, and I just love how nature creates this insanely intricate pattern by the billion or trillion, not using some fancy equipment, not using a mold or a template. It's just floating out in a cloud somewhere. So the laws of physics give us these exquisite shots. Click. So here's some more. Now, it turns out there's a bunch of challenges to taking pictures of snowflakes. They're small. Mostly they're a couple millimeters across. And the detail is very, very fine. And they degrade very quickly. So let's click. So I built another special purpose microscope for that. They degrade so quickly you can't bring them inside. You have to bring the microscope outside. And even so, you've got to make sure that the parts of the microscope, you just hang there for a moment. The parts of the microscope that touch the snowflake have to be chilled even beyond that. So here's the process. First, you have to go to a place that's really cold. Most of the US isn't reliably cold enough. You need it to be -5 Fahrenheit or -15 C to get good looking flakes. So then you catch them on a piece of black foam core, and this is what I'm doing here. Click. And then here's the microscope set up on the porch. You also need an Airbnb or a hotel room that has a porch. And then we focus stack them because they're much deeper than the depth of field of the scopes that we're using. We also had to build a special illumination system called Reinberg illumination. Of course, a snowflake is clear. So shooting clear on clear is hard. In the 19th century, a guy named Reinberg figured out you could make a funny kind of a dark field photography using filters that works brilliantly for it. So here's a picture of the insides of the thing.
So the filter is creating the color background. Is that, if I understand that right, Nathan? Because you have black backgrounds, blue backgrounds, color backgrounds, and that's coming from the filter or from what you have underneath the snowflake?
Well, okay, so if you look at the thing here, you can see that there's an annular color rings.
Yeah.
There's actually a Cinder filter also. The Cinder filter determines what the background is. Then these other two colors, let's go back a couple to a good shot. Yeah, so go back one. Forward, stop. Okay, particularly if you look at the one over on the right, you'll see it's on a dark background, but you see there's red highlights.
Sure.
And that comes from having a red filter around the edge. And because it's around the edge, if there's nothing in between, the camera will never see it. It only sees it if the crystal refracts it into the frame.
And that's going to be different depending on the structure, so-called structure of the thing you're photographing.
So it shows the structure off very well. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Okay.
To have color do that, I think, Nathan, is another aspect of photography. When I teach my students about color or black and white or film and digital, I said, you've got to think before you do it. It's not just accidental. So the color will determine sometimes the shape or the meaning, if I can say that,
yes,
as opposed to being accidental, which is very, very interesting.
Okay, go forward, and then I think,
Wow.
here's one of the problems. Even with being outside, even with chilling the stage, even with all of this, snowflakes do something called sublimation. They evaporate directly from solid. So this is the same snowflake 5 minutes apart.
Wow.
So you just don't have much time. All of the sharp edges on the outside, it seems to go outside in for some reason. The sharp edges start eroding away. In theory, there's a way you can control this if you can control the humidity around it carefully. And so I've built a new rig that we're going to try this winter for that. Another problem you get is snowflakes often stick together. So snowflakes will have 6 arms. Well, these looks like 3 snowflakes, but the bottom corner one is actually like 2 snowflakes. They're all stuck together, and they stuck together in the air. There's not much you can do about it.
Yeah, but it makes an extraordinary picture. It's very beautiful.
It does.
It gives you a sense of time passing, which is another aspect of photography that I find fascinating. You feel it as if you're watching it melt. You said 5 minutes. I would have thought 5 seconds, but you have 5 minutes to
you have
actually do it
a few minutes, yeah.
Wow.
Now that's outside,
right.
with the microscope slide chilled.
Right. Okay.
And
I missed that.
And it turns out to chill the slide, we don't use glass. We have an artificial sapphire slide.
Wow.
Because it has about 7 times the thermal conductivity of glass.
I see.
And it turns out high-end watches have artificial sapphire watch covers.
Wow.
Or watch crystals, because it doesn't scratch very easily. And so here's one where the Cinder filter has a gradient in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the gradient is from, overall it would be from sort of yellow to blue, but this is very near the center. Mm-hmm. And of course that gradient is thrown out of focus. And then here, besides some of that Reinberg light, I also put the little top light on it. So now there's a little bit of light that's reflecting.
I see.
And
wow.
It sort of highlights it in a very different way. You can see it's got particularly the one that's against the darkest part, really comes out with the reflected light.
Yeah. These are amazing.
Now I do all these things because I love them, but ultimately people kept asking if they could buy them, so I opened up some galleries.
Right.
And the thing I love about the galleries is it gives me a great excuse to go take pictures. I have plenty of other things going on in my life, but I feel like I've got a duty to the gallery to go take pictures.
That's great.
And our the next book we have coming up, where we use all these techniques and then some, is Modernist Pizza, which will be the world's largest book on pizza.
Now, Nathan, why pizza? I get why snowflakes, but why pizza?
Well, so I'd already done a big book that covered all of savory cuisine, pretty much. I did another huge book that covered all of bread. Pizza is interesting because it's sort of like bread and it's sort of like a main dish. I think it's the most popular single dish in the entire world.
Oh my gosh.
It's also the most popular imported dish in the world. You know, you could make an argument that there's some Chinese dish that more Chinese eat than eat pizza. That may be true, but of the imported dishes into the world, people in China have pizza. People everywhere have pizza.
Wow.
In fact, we determined through the internet and then finally by calling up embassies in Washington, D.C., that all but 3 countries in the world have a pizzeria.
Amazing. So that's great. And I guess there's a competition as to who invented pizza. What's your opinion about that?
Well, we did a ton of research on that. We have a large history section, which was quite fun. So the answer is that pizza has mutated many, many times. In biology, they'll talk about the most recent common ancestor. Well, the most recent common ancestor of pizza as we know it around the world was a street food dish in Naples in the 19th century. And it was virtually unknown in Italy. And it was virtually undocumented. I mean, there were accounts that talked about pizza, but there were no recipes. The first recipe in Italy is in the 1920s. But what happened is in 1870, Italy became a country. Mm-hmm. Naples went from being a capital city to a regional city. They had a cholera epidemic. Stuff was really tough. And a third of the population of Naples emigrated. And they came to the United States. They came to South America. And they brought pizza with them. Now, meanwhile, the people in Naples weren't content to stay put. And even though they like to claim it's ancient, modern pizza you get in Naples was really developed in the 60s and 70s on the basis of flour from Canada. Mm-hmm. That was way better than the flour that they previously had. Right. Then pizza in the United States started mutating, and that's why we have New York pizza and Chicago pizza. And I went to Sao Paulo and Buenos Aires, and those are both countries that have their own unique style of pizza.
And that's all covered in the recipes with the book. Is that right? Yeah, that's great. Fantastic.
So I guess here's questions and answers.
Well, I've got one, and I think you alluded to this, but one of my grad students is asking, at what point did you decide that food photography could be considered an art form or an art in and of itself?
Well, I have a whole talk that I give on that one topic, and to me, it's very weird. Most kinds of commercial photography also are exhibited, if done by the best practitioners, as art. Mm-hmm. Okay? Portraits, totally that way. Most portrait photography is commercial. You pay money to get a picture, but the best portraits are up there. Well, architectural photography, the same thing. Fashion photography, what could be more commercial than shooting fashion shots for ads? Those are up there. You know, celebrity portraits. Annie Leibovitz stuff is exhibited in museums. Not that it shouldn't be.
Right.
But food photography is a bizarre exception. Now, there have been great photographic artists who shot food. Edward Weston, Pepper Number 30,
of course.
Irving Penn loved doing food photography. And had some amazing pictures. But those guys got away with food photography almost despite everything else.
Right. Yeah.
So it's very funny that people tend to think of food photography as art. I did a test on Amazon where I looked at picture books, and there's thousands of picture books under art photography. If you look under subjects, the most popular subject is naked women. The second most popular is naked men. But any subject you can imagine, like dogs, there's 10,000 picture books at Amazon on dogs. So much so, there's even these weird little subcategories. Like there's 6 or 7 books of pictures of dogs taken underwater. Right? It just, why? Well,
Yeah.
because we love those topics. Food, coffee table books, 0. I mean, you can find food in other books, but that's not the same as saying this is about food.
But
And so, I think now you can always argue that maybe my pictures aren't art, or they're not to your liking or whatever, but I think food itself can be an art. And I think food photography, which is about something that we all need, we all love. If erotic photography makes you horny, food photography makes you hungry, why isn't that a legitimate response? And of course, it goes much deeper than that. People develop these incredible memories, which is why we have the concept of comfort food. And anyway, I really think food is art, and food photography can be art.
Well, I think also the analogy you gave about portraiture, I teach portraiture, and we're having an exhibition right now in the museum that Alex is the curator of Albert Watson's work. And when we look at Albert Watson's pictures, for example, of famous people like Jack Nicholson or David Bowie, they're not just a picture of how the person looks.
Yes.
And it becomes something totally different, that whether you're a fan or not, of course, everyone's a fan of David Bowie, but if you're not, that picture still becomes something else. And I want to mention that I work for a lot of magazines that do food. And I think what is interesting about these pictures that you've done, and some of the ones that you mentioned of Penn, is that they have another whole level. When you look at them, you're looking at abstraction, you're looking at concept, you're looking at intentionality, as opposed to I'm about to pick up a fork and eat that, like in Bon Appetit. Nothing wrong with that either. But I think that these have that quality. There's a famous picture that Penn did, I'm sure you know it, of brie. It's a brie that's gone off and it's melting and it's green, and you think, oh, but it makes you think about what that means. So someone's asking whether you'd rather photograph food or actually eat it, but I think probably there's a combination. So what I want to ask apropos of that question about the process, if I could, because we're talking about poetry, science, food, concept, and photography does involve all those things. And it's always had this not accusation, but sense, oh, it's a machine taking the picture. And as you very clearly mentioned, it's a machine taken by a person and building the cameras. So what's the process where you get an idea for a blueberry, or what comes first, the blueberry or the machine? Can you talk a little bit about that process and how you build that out?
So it's, this is the famous chicken and egg question. And it happens all different ways. So a picture I didn't show is, besides the aerial shots, I've taken a bunch of drone shots. And the reason I got into drones was very specific. I discovered that in the spring, in the Central Valley of California, there's thousands of acres of almonds, and they all bloom. Wow. And there's this crazy amount of blooming, and almonds are a bit like cherries, and the blooms come on before there's any vegetation. So you have this crazy scene. Well, how do you shoot that? Well, drones was clearly, hey, there's a way to do it. Now, it turned out that drones are really oriented towards video, so we had to do a lot of work to write our own software to take nice pictures with stills. For my macro panorama, part of it is I found that lens in a catalog of industrial lenses. And I thought, well, that makes it possible. If there was no possible lens, you mentioned at a student, they're making their own lenses. I have actually gotten the professional lens design software, And I've almost gone and designed my own literal lenses. Particularly because I found there's a place in China that will make them for you once you have all of the stuff.
Well, apparently my student, her name is Wenyi Li, she built it and then she built it on a 3D printer. And I'm going to put her in touch with your team and see maybe she's going to come and be an intern. But they're very beautiful. They're about self-portraiture and isolation. But that leads me to another question from one of our students. And they're asking, how long does it take you to develop the self-made cameras from the idea you have, you partly explained that, until you finish the cameras that you showed us?
You know, the ideal case, which many of them are, is on the order of months. The hardest one to date was the Snowflake microscope. That took about 18 months. Wow. Because I had to learn lots of things as I went along with it. For example, one of the early things I developed was a way to cover a phase 1 large, medium format sensor from a microscope objective. They're not actually spec'd to do that, but I discovered certain brands would work if you used the right intermediate lens. Then we had to develop the cooling system to chill the thing. And then we had to adapt an illumination system. With microscopy, the resolution depends not only on the lens or objective, but on how you light it. Because you need to have light from enough angles that it fills the aperture, otherwise you get lower resolution.
Right.
And so each of these different things, we built the thing out of carbon fiber because metal expands and contracts too much. And so we wanted something that would be stable. As it got colder, it wouldn't be shrinking. And so that was the most difficult one to date. There's a couple new ones we're working on. I built a instant panorama outfit recently. So you may be familiar with panorama robots that will move a camera to different positions. Yeah. I love those.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go storm chasing to photograph tornadoes and lightning. Now, the trouble with that is you want the wide field of view because these storms are enormous. It's the only photography thing I've ever done where the distance to the subject is measured in miles. Right. But you also want the wide field. But the robot won't get it. If a lightning bolt happens, it'll get cut off.
Right.
Well, not if you buy 4 camera bodies and strap them all together in a frame with them all at the right angle, and then you get them all synchronized so that you can take the one click and get the whole thing.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So that works really well.
So basically, you have a situation. You start out with a piece of equipment, and then as you get the temperature or the width or something, then you have to adapt it and change something and add something. So it's a process. You said 18 months for the snowflakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I've got I don't think we have time for too many, but I've got a great question on a totally different topic. And Elisa Song is asking about color and how the color of food can change your response to it. So, and she mentions blue food. Do you have a reaction to the idea of color and food and how it affects us, or how it affects your photography?
So we're highly visual animals, highly visual.
Right.
And as a result, the way food looks actually matters in how we perceive it in very deep ways. So here's 2 examples. There's some people who have done tests where they have people eat food under different colored lights.
Oh, wow.
And if you're under green light, you don't eat as much. Here's another one I love. they took a bowl of soup, glued it down to a table, and had people eat soup out of it. Well, they had rigged the bowl of soup, unbeknownst to the people, with a tube underneath, so it would maintain a constant level as you took some out. And the question was, would you stop eating the soup when you were felt full, or when you saw you had done this? Well, people with the refilling bowl ate twice as much soup before they gave up. But my favorite one is if you change the color of wine. And there's two ways people have done this. They've taken white wine and added red food coloring to it, or they've served it in an opaque glass or a colored glass. You can serve white wine to wine connoisseurs, and if it's dyed red, they will describe it in red wine terms, and no one will get that it's a white wine. This experiment has been done multiple times, and people always say, oh, of course I could tell, white wine from, but not if you take a set of different, because white wines, across all white wines, have a huge range of flavor. So, if you only had Chardonnay, maybe you could tell it from a red wine. But if you had a diversity of red wines and a diversity of white, we use the color to figure out what we ought to taste, which, freaks out wine people who think, oh, this has got to be some absolute, but it's a human perception issue. So yeah, color is super important. And it's something that we play with in the books some, and we encourage people to, chefs to play with. But if you go too far afield, like, for example, you had blue strawberries in a salad, people might eat it, but they won't be recognizing it the same way as a red one.
Now, I think I was thinking about your blueberries, and I was thinking, well, I eat blueberries every morning. I get organic ones. I'm very happy. But if I got a piece of cheese and it was blue, I don't mean blue cheese, I mean cheddar, I think that doesn't go. And I don't know if this is our memory. If we think about Proust, which I'm now finally reading, Remembrance of Things Past, and the famous Madeleine that he remembered.
Yes.
And that memory of food and the color of it, I think all these things come together. We have to stop. I would love to talk to you
Which is why
for
I think
an hour.
it can be art.
Yeah.
I mean, you put the finger on it. It's to the degree that it grabs you the way that the Madeleine grabbed Proust, or frankly, his readers after that.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely, it can.
And I think food, like, for example, perfume, has this ephemeral effect. But the last thing I want to say, and I'm getting a lot more comment, we're going to field these to you, but Nathan, I think that what you're doing in this work is what photography does, is show us the world from a totally different angle. And that's so amazing to think about the things we eat, seeing them bigger or smaller or melting in front of our eyes, and you're getting those pictures. And that's what the best photography does, I think, is that combination. The machines add to that. But I think your point of view is extraordinary, and we have to find a way to bring you back for just to talk about, I think, the color of food or something like that. These are wonderful pictures. And I love this one with a tilted wine glass. But last thing, why is the wine glass, the stem slightly tilted? Someone's asking.
Okay, because to make this, we attached the wine glass to a motorized thing that was like a rail, almost like a, think of it like an amateur crane set, but much more sturdy and much faster. And when we first started doing this to make it splash, we had it set maybe a little bit too high and way too high, and it snaps off the glass. But there's an intermediate part where it actually bends. And even though that's not quite normal, I still love the dynamic, curve of the wine fits perfectly with that, because of course that's what caused it.
It also gives this feeling of the fluidity of things that we think aren't fluid.
Yes, exactly.
Wine splashes, glasses aren't supposed to, but the glass is moving. So I think it sort of redefines physicality for us. It's a great picture.
Right.
Wonderful.
Well, you know what? The wine could be glass.
Right.
And as you say, the glass could be fluid.
And Brano. Yeah. And thank you so much. We'll talk again soon. I'm going to send these, Alex Sachs will send the video, the recording to your team. I can't thank you enough for this. It's given me a million ideas, and I know it has our students as well. So
excellent.
I can't thank you.
Well, it's a great pleasure talking to you.
Great to talk to you too. Good luck on your next project, whatever it is. We'll be looking for it.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, Nathan. Bye-bye.